Crowds move fast, trends change every week, opinions shift overnight. Yet the most emotionally intelligent people often move in the opposite direction, quietly, calmly, without needing attention for it. While others chase approval, they slowly detach from the pressure to fit in. And the strange part is, this behavior is usually misunderstood. Many people assume mature empaths avoid trends because they want to appear different or superior. But psychology tells a very different story. Emotional depth changes the way a person experiences social behavior. Over time, mature empaths begin noticing patterns most people ignore. They notice how trends are often driven by insecurity, how social validation quietly controls decision-making, how people slowly lose their identity trying to stay accepted by everyone around them. And once an empath becomes emotionally aware of this cycle, it becomes difficult to participate in it the same way again. This is why many mature empaths start pulling away from performative behavior, online pressure, and constant comparison, not because they hate people, not because they think they are better, but because their nervous system becomes exhausted by environments that feel emotionally artificial. In this video, you will understand the deeper psychology behind why mature empaths rarely follow the crowd, why emotional intelligence often creates independence, and how empathy changes the brain's relationship with validation, attention, and belonging. You will also discover why emotionally sensitive people often become quieter with age, why many empaths stop seeking approval after painful life experiences, and why society frequently misunderstands emotionally independent people. Some of the psychological patterns behind this behavior are rarely discussed openly, especially the hidden connection between empathy and emotional overstimulation. Research in psychology has shown that highly sensitive individuals process emotional and social information more deeply than the average person. That deeper processing changes how they react to trends, group behavior, and social pressure. What looks normal to most people can feel emotionally overwhelming to them, and this creates a powerful internal conflict between fitting in and protecting inner peace. By the end of this video, you will understand why mature empaths often choose authenticity over popularity, silence over performance, and peace over attention. You may even recognize parts of yourself that never fully made sense before, because sometimes the people who seem distant from modern culture are not disconnected at all. They simply see through it more clearly than others. And once someone begins seeing beyond emotional manipulation, forced validation, and superficial behavior, returning to blind conformity becomes almost impossible. So stay with me until the end, because the final psychological insight explains why the deepest people often stop following trends entirely, and how this transformation quietly changes their relationships, identity, and emotional world forever. Welcome to the channel, where we explore the hidden psychology of empathy, human behavior, emotional intelligence, and personal transformation. If you enjoy deep psychological insights that reveal the truth behind human nature, subscribe to the channel and become part of a community that understands what most people never notice. Most people spend a large part of their lives trying to avoid rejection, even when they do not admit it openly. The fear of being excluded quietly shapes their behavior every single day. It affects the clothes they wear, the opinions they repeat, the personalities they display online, and even the way they speak around different people. Human beings naturally want connection because the brain is designed to seek safety through belonging. For thousands of years, survival depended on being accepted by the group. Rejection once meant danger. Isolation once meant vulnerability. And even today, the human nervous system still reacts to social exclusion as if it were a threat. This is why trends become so powerful. They give people a sense of belonging. They create emotional safety. Following what everyone else is doing feels comforting because it reduces the fear of standing alone. But mature empaths slowly begin noticing something uncomfortable beneath all of this. They start realizing that constant imitation slowly disconnects people from who they truly are. At first, many empaths also try to fit in like everyone else. They adapt to social expectations. They follow what seems popular. They mirror the emotional energy around them because empathy naturally makes them sensitive to social environments. But over time, this becomes emotionally exhausting. Mature empaths absorb more emotional information than most people realize. They do not simply hear words. They feel emotional tension. They notice emotional masks. They sense insecurity hidden behind confidence. And because of this, trying to constantly adjust themselves to social trends starts creating internal pressure inside them. Their emotional world becomes crowded, too many voices, too many expectations, too much noise. Eventually, they begin feeling emotionally disconnected from themselves without fully understanding why. Many empaths experience this long before they can explain it. They suddenly feel drained after social environments that once seemed exciting. They feel tired after spending too much time online. They notice that constantly keeping up with trends creates emotional fatigue instead of happiness. And this realization slowly changes their psychology. They begin understanding that popularity and emotional truth are not always the same thing. Just because something is widely accepted does not mean it feels emotionally healthy. Just because millions of people follow a behavior does not mean it creates inner peace. Mature empaths slowly stop asking themselves what people will approve of and begin asking a far more difficult question. What actually feels genuine to me? This question changes everything because authenticity often requires emotional courage. It forces people to examine how much of their identity was shaped by social pressure instead of personal truth. And many mature empaths discover that they spent years adapting themselves to avoid discomfort. They learned to become emotionally flexible in order to maintain harmony with others. They became versions of themselves that were easier to accept socially. But emotional maturity slowly removes the desire to perform constantly for approval. Mature empaths become more aware of the emotional cost of pretending. They begin noticing how deeply performative modern culture has become. They see people changing personalities depending on trends. They see people copying behaviors they do not truly connect with emotionally. They see how quickly public opinion changes depending on what gains attention online. And because empaths naturally process emotional information deeply, these patterns become difficult to ignore. What once looked normal now starts feeling emotionally artificial. This is where many mature empaths begin emotionally separating themselves from the crowd without even trying to. Their priorities quietly change. Inner alignment becomes more important than external approval. Emotional honesty becomes more important than social acceptance. And while many people mistake this shift as rebellion, it is usually the opposite. Mature empaths are not trying to prove anything. Most of the time, they are simply trying to protect their emotional balance from constant overstimulation. Because the deeper an empath becomes emotionally aware, the harder it becomes to blindly follow social pressure without questioning it. And this awareness begins exposing another uncomfortable truth about trends themselves. Most trends are not built around emotional fulfillment. They are built around emotional manipulation. Mature empaths slowly begin noticing how modern culture constantly triggers insecurity to control attention. Fear of missing out becomes a business model. Validation becomes addictive. Comparison becomes normalized. Social approval becomes treated like emotional survival. And because empaths naturally observe emotional patterns carefully, they start seeing how many trends depend on emotional dependency to survive. They notice how quickly people change themselves to avoid being excluded. They notice how people silence their real opinions to maintain acceptance. They notice how many online personalities are carefully designed performances rather than authentic expressions. What appears confident on the surface often hides deep emotional dependence underneath. This is one of the biggest psychological shifts mature empaths experience. They stop automatically admiring attention because they begin seeing the emotional insecurity hidden behind much of it. They understand that many people are not expressing themselves freely. They are performing for validation. They are adjusting themselves for approval. They are shaping their identity around audience reactions. And once empaths begin recognizing this pattern repeatedly, trends lose much of their emotional power over them. Because emotionally aware people start valuing truth more than popularity, they begin asking questions most people avoid. Why does this trend exist? What emotional weakness is it targeting? Why are people so desperate to participate in it? Why does disagreement create so much anxiety online? Mature empaths become highly sensitive to emotional manipulation because they feel emotional energy deeply. They can often sense when environments are driven by pressure instead of authenticity. This makes them more cautious socially, not judgmental, not hateful, just more conscious. They begin protecting their emotional space more carefully because they understand how easily emotional energy spreads between people. A room filled with insecurity affects them. A culture obsessed with validation affects them. Constant emotional comparison affects them. And many mature empaths eventually realize they cannot maintain inner peace while constantly absorbing emotionally chaotic environments. This awareness changes their relationship with attention itself. They stop chasing visibility. They stop needing constant recognition. They stop feeling emotionally dependent on approval from strangers, and this often confuses people around them because modern culture teaches the opposite. Society rewards visibility. It rewards performance. It rewards emotional stimulation. But mature empaths slowly become tired of living inside emotional noise. Many of them spent years trying to adapt socially, trying to fit into groups, trying to avoid conflict, trying to make everyone comfortable, trying to explain themselves repeatedly, trying to feel emotionally understood. And eventually exhaustion teaches them a lesson that emotional maturity could not teach any other way. Constant adaptation slowly destroys inner peace. At some point, many mature empaths begin realizing they have spent too much of their life emotionally available to everyone except themselves. They absorbed other people's stress, other people's expectations, other people's emotional instability, and because empaths naturally care deeply, they often ignore their own emotional exhaustion for years before finally reaching a breaking point. This is why emotional maturity changes their priorities so dramatically. They stop romanticizing constant social interaction. They stop believing every connection must be maintained. They stop feeling responsible for everyone's emotional comfort. Instead, they become protective of their nervous system, and psychology strongly supports this shift. Highly sensitive individuals process emotional stimuli more intensely than average. Their brains react more strongly to emotional environments, social tension, and overstimulation. What feels manageable to others may feel mentally exhausting to them after prolonged exposure. This is why mature empaths begin valuing peace so deeply. They are not being antisocial. Their nervous system simply becomes tired of unnecessary emotional chaos. They realize that constant comparison creates emotional static inside the mind. Endless opinions create confusion. Constant stimulation creates anxiety. Performative environments create emotional fatigue. And slowly, peace becomes more valuable than attention. Silence becomes more valuable than popularity. Authenticity becomes more valuable than belonging everywhere. This transformation often happens quietly. Mature empaths rarely announce it publicly. They simply begin changing their behavior slowly over time. They spend less energy trying to impress people. They become more selective with social environments. They become harder to emotionally manipulate through trends or peer pressure. And perhaps most importantly, they stop confusing attention with connection. Because emotionally mature people eventually realize that being seen by everyone does not guarantee being understood by anyone. This shift also changes the way mature empaths think before following anything socially popular. Unlike emotionally reactive people, mature empaths often pause before emotionally investing themselves into trends, movements, opinions, or collective behavior. They analyze first. They observe patterns. They question motives. They think deeply about emotional consequences. While many people instinctively imitate what gains social approval, mature empaths begin asking deeper psychological questions. Why is this becoming popular right now? Is this actually helping people emotionally, or is it feeding insecurity? Is this encouraging growth or emotional dependency? Does this align with my values, or am I only attracted to it because everyone else is doing it? These questions naturally create emotional independence because self-awareness weakens blind conformity. Mature empaths process emotional experiences deeply, which means shallow behaviors often feel emotionally unsatisfying to them. Fast validation loses its excitement quickly. Surface-level trends begin feeling repetitive. Emotional performance begins feeling empty. And over time, mature empaths stop forcing themselves to participate in things that feel emotionally disconnected from their values. This does not come from arrogance, it comes from emotional self-awareness. Many people misunderstand this difference completely. They assume emotionally independent people are trying to appear superior, but mature empaths are usually not interested in standing above others. They simply stop forcing themselves to belong everywhere. They no longer see universal acceptance as emotionally necessary. They become comfortable disappointing people who expect constant conformity from them. And this emotional independence changes how others react to them socially. Society often becomes uncomfortable around people who no longer seek validation in predictable ways, because emotionally independent individuals quietly challenge group behavior without even speaking. Their calmness exposes how dependent modern culture has become on attention and approval. When someone does not react emotionally to trends the same way everyone else does, people begin projecting assumptions onto them. They are called distant, different, hard to read, too quiet, arrogant, detached. But most of the time, mature empaths are simply emotionally cautious. They understand how emotionally draining performative environments can become. They know how quickly people lose themselves trying to satisfy public expectations. And because they spent years emotionally adapting to others, they become deeply protective of their emotional balance later in life. This often creates a quiet loneliness many mature empaths rarely discuss openly, because once someone becomes emotionally aware of social manipulation, returning to unconscious participation becomes difficult. They begin feeling disconnected from conversations centered entirely around validation, gossip, comparison, or performance. They start craving emotional depth instead of stimulation. They become more selective about where they invest emotional energy. And this selectiveness can sometimes appear cold to people who do not understand it psychologically. But mature empaths are not emotionally empty. In many cases, they feel too much, not too little. Their silence often comes from emotional overstimulation rather than emotional absence. They learn that protecting their peace sometimes requires distance from emotionally chaotic environments. They learn that constantly explaining themselves drains energy. They learn that not everyone deserves unlimited emotional access to them. And this realization becomes one of the most powerful turning points in the emotional development of an empath. Because once they stop depending on social approval for emotional stability, their entire relationship with the world begins changing. They stop shaping themselves around trends. They stop allowing public opinion to define their worth. They stop emotionally shrinking themselves to remain accepted. And instead of constantly asking how to fit into the world around them, they begin asking whether the environments around them are emotionally healthy in the first place. So no, mature empaths do not slowly disconnect from trends because they believe they are wiser, superior, or more important than everyone else. Most of the time, the truth is far quieter than that. They simply reach a point in life where protecting their inner peace becomes more important than performing for social acceptance. After years of absorbing emotional pressure, adapting to expectations, and trying to fit into environments that never truly felt right, something inside them changes. They begin realizing that constantly following the crowd can slowly pull people away from their real identity. And once an empath becomes emotionally aware of that feeling, pretending becomes exhausting. They stop asking the world who they need to become in order to be accepted. They stop shaping their personality around trends, validation, and temporary attention. And little by little, they begin listening to themselves again. Their intuition becomes louder than public opinion. Their peace becomes more valuable than popularity. Their authenticity becomes more important than belonging everywhere. That is why mature empaths often appear different from the world around them, not because they reject people, but because they no longer want to lose themselves trying to be liked by everyone. And the deeper someone understands their own emotional world, the less they feel the need to constantly follow the crowd. Because true emotional maturity is not about becoming cold. It is about finally becoming honest with yourself. Honest about what drains you. Honest about what feels fake. Honest about what kind of life actually brings peace instead of approval. And in a world constantly demanding attention, emotional independence quietly becomes one of the rarest forms of strength. If this video felt personal to you, there is a good chance you are someone who values authenticity more than validation. Someone who thinks deeply, feels deeply, and quietly notices things most people overlook. So if you enjoy videos about empathy, emotional intelligence, psychology, human behavior, and the hidden patterns behind modern life, subscribe to the channel and become part of this community. Like this video if you connected with these truths. And share it with someone who has been slowly outgrowing the pressure to fit in, because some messages are not meant for everyone. They are meant for the people who feel everything deeply, but finally choose peace over performance.